Oh, and good evening. It's December 4th, 2025, and welcome to another one of our episodes of Coffee and Donuts with Skip Moen. As you know, I enjoy Skip's teachings and all of his reflections, and we've covered a few of his postings. But I really wanted to share more of what Skip chooses to share, so I reached out with permission to use more of his Today's Word articles. There are links in the description to this article and to his website. They're down below, and I highly encourage you to please take a look. There is so much more. So let's get started with Coffee and Donuts with Skip Moen and the Babel syndrome on the Dusty Feet. Our hope with the Dusty Feet is to foster discussion and to help build and support communities. If you're not already connected to a community or just want to share and interact, this community has 4 primary ways to interact. 1. TheDustyFeet.com. That's our primary place to find everything. You are always free to comment. 2. Substack. Link is in the description below. It's designed around the written and spoken text. It's a place to connect to ourselves and others. 3. Facebook at The Dusty Feet. These videos and other videos are also available for comment and discussion. 4. And as always, you're welcome to send an email to bob@thedustyfeet.com. These places, they will be moderated and guidelines will be set to ensure healthy, safe discussion. And as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place where we can safely explore the endless ways of God and the interconnection of His creation. Belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. And of course, before we forget, if you do find these kinds of podcasts useful to you, please, that is, do when you script that subscribe button. Those reminders, they just help you. But also, if you think these might be useful to others, please, that is when you click that like button, because that is how YouTube chooses to share these to more people if they wish. Okay, so here's the article. The Babel Syndrome by Skip Moen, November 26, 2025. Genesis 11:7. Come, let us go down there, confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech. Confuse. When you listen to someone speak, what do you hear? Sounds, of course. Usually sounds that make up words, that make up thoughts. But other than the audio signals, do you hear the meaning of those sounds? I live in Italy. I don't speak Italian very well. Even the smallest conversations leave me with only audio sounds, not meanings. I don't know the vocabulary and the syntax well enough, right? I can learn. I can learn to hear the definitions of these sounds, but it doesn't mean that I know what the speaker intends. If an Italian says, non vedo l'ora, do I hear, I'm so excited, instead of, I don't see the hour? This common idiom makes no literal sense in English. I hear, I just don't understand. These days, I wonder if the whole world isn't caught in the Babel syndrome, hearing but not understanding, even if you speak the same language. We've often investigated paradigms and their effect on biblical translations. The unconscious assumptions of the translator often alter the meaning of the original text. Sometimes we're shocked at how much things are changed, but we shouldn't be. Because each one of us has a paradigm, a way of looking at the world, a set of assumptions about the meaning of things. Native language has a lot to do with paradigm formation, right? It does with personal development, community, family, orientation, all these things and more. They all affect how we think about the world. Until we articulate them clearly, we're subject to their influence without even realizing it. I think this seems to be the case with politics today. It appears that the paradigms of the left and the right are so internally absorbing that we just don't understand each other, even if we're using the same vocabulary. For example, an attack on democracy has completely different meanings according to one's political persuasion. Without deep paradigm articulation, real conversation, well, it's impossible. We just talk past each other, always believing that we're right and the other side, they're just obtuse. Which brings us to Babel. Babel is about what I hear and understand. It isn't necessary to imagine that God altered the speech of everyone so that they heard foreign languages. It's only necessary to imagine that paradigm shifted so that even the same words now had different meanings, right? Babel might be about foreign languages, but today the Babel syndrome is about hearing only my meanings instead of others. And in particular, hearing only what I want to hear, not God's words. Why did God decide to confuse the language, right? The Hebrew verb, Baal, right, is about mixing things together. The noun, Tebel, it's only used 2 times. And in both cases, it's about mixing up God's divine order regarding sexual relations. In other words, confusing what God has established is essentially Babel. In the case of the tower, God had established the prime directive, i.e., be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. But men, well, they didn't spread out. Men attempted to build something that would reach up to God instead of across creation. This needed correction. Correction required a biblical pun, right? What they mixed up, God mixed up more in order to force his intention. Maybe we need a biblical pun. Perhaps we need to unmix our own mixed up confusion. And the only way to do that, well, that just seems to be through divine intervention. Otherwise, we just might be committing the same Babel mistake, hearing only what we want to hear. Thank you, Skip. More than a little to ponder here. And I suppose I'd like to toss out a few to consider of my own. I want to talk about some more amongst ourselves. I mentioned here before in the Dusty Feet that my wife and I like to watch a lot of foreign murder mystery dramas, and I believe I mentioned before that we watch it with subtitles, not dubbed. Part of the reason is that we'd like to do what is precisely what Skip talked about in his time in Italy. It's about hearing what somebody's saying and whether I understand that meaning or not. Because I think meaning has 2 parts. One of the literal meaning of the word choice, yeah, but the other is tone, right? He captured it in that idiom he used, the phrase where the words appear to say one thing, but they really mean another. But any other part is that inflection intensity, the emotion that comes with a particular word and or phrase, right? And like Skip, I don't understand the languages. But I can learn, right? Or at least slowly catch a few, and I kind of understand how these conversations are put together, right? That language structure. But even in that, we find out as we're listening to the words that some of the things that I think we know with the words in the subtitles underneath, they don't appear to match. Probably most often that's drawn by language structure, where you put nouns before adjectives or before verbs in different languages, because there is a difference. Sometimes it's not even close. And I think even at times they'll try to give an English phrase that captures a bit of the idiom common to the original language to help the audience that is just reading the subtitles. But the reason I like to listen is that I get emotion. I get intensity where the sound matches the picture, the crying, the laughter, the pain, the despair. So much of that is in hearing, sometimes as much as it is in seeing and or reading. And then, of course, sometimes they just replace the words that they may not want to type in subtext with another word that's maybe a little more family friendly, but it's the sounds we hear. I want to put it out there. This is my personal belief. I know that it's not everyone's understanding or belief, yet it's the way that I choose to believe, and I see and I hear something in Scripture. So one of the things is about that miracle in the scroll of Acts, right? In that the unscrambling of Babel for a moment in time. My personal belief is that the tongues mentioned in Scripture refer to the unfamiliarity with other languages. As these groups began to gather, because they had been scattered all over, people are now coming in. They're hearing, they're understanding, and they're understanding God talking to them. But still, they only know their language. So when God chooses, then he gets to let us all hear it. And sometimes that's by the literal way of us hearing, as in the incredible miracle in Acts. And sometimes it's merely that there's somebody else in the group who comes from another culture, speaks another language. Now that group has people coming in from all over the world, right? They come together. God has spoken to them. God has given them a word. Still, they only speak their language. But they come to speak. They want to share. They get up. They're excited. You can probably hear that excitement. You probably hear the emotion. All of it. But somebody's got to tell you what it means. Scripture says to be careful about sharing if no one's there to interpret what's being said, the words that they're hearing. People can't understand it. Something's missing. We need somebody to help us understand. Today, we'd call that translation. Somebody who helps us translate the other common tongue into our common tongue. You know, today at times, it seems I need someone to translate the common vernacular that I hear so I can understand the meaning, because believe it or not, I'm not getting it. But in today's world, in our time, real-time translation, we can get it on our phone, on your computer, on your tablet, in your smart glasses. They all have the ability now to let me see what somebody's saying. Again, it lets me see the words. But until I'm looking at them or can hear them either on a podcast or on good old-fashioned old-time radio or on the telephone, then I get to hear what's behind the words. And yes, I agree with Skip that when that happened at Babel, it wasn't just a word. The paradigms changed. Everything changed. I want to dip our toe in a topic that'll probably we need to leave for another day to discuss. And actually, I promise we'll have another day to discuss it. I just don't know when. That prime directive Skip mentioned, the prime directive that we were supposed to be out and about, right? Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. That was said long before the incident with the fruit. That prime directive was designed to take us outside the garden. That's a topic for another time. But Babel, oh yeah, for sure. We are in a political time where it's almost as bad as that. We're hearing words that we understand, and yet the 100 people in the pack around us, well, not everyone's hearing the same thing. And everyone who is speaking, well, maybe they're not speaking the same thing. Do we have the patience, the love, the care, the concern to maybe have the ability to stop, pause, realize what we're hearing, or if we're hearing impaired, what we're seeing, and maybe we just don't understand their side. It might just be a way to begin a conversation by asking more questions. And in that, it can turn the interaction into one of care, concern, and not, just as Jesus would have put it, that clanging noise or banging drum. Yeah. My hope and prayer is that in the time we're given today, we can take the time to read through words, get to know the person we are called to love. Because of all that babble, I think one of the words that gets babbled the worst, and probably the most, is love. So thank you for with us tonight for another short but hopefully worthwhile discussion amongst yourselves about the Babel syndrome. Maybe, where do we go from here on the Dusty Feet?